Good evening, everybody. My name is Bert Dicht, and let's see, let me just go back here. My name is Bert Dicht. I am Vice President of Membership of the National Space Society, and on behalf of my colleague Larry Ahern, Vice President of Chapters, I'd like to welcome you to our Space Forum this evening, Becoming Off-Worldly, Preparing for Your Future Spaceflight Journey. So I know you're going to have a good time tonight with our speaker. So as always, welcome to our Space Forums and Town Halls. We certainly appreciate your participation in these events. We've had some really great speakers and we have another one tonight. So we really enjoy your company. And what I want to do is just go through our agenda. Typically, I do a quick virtual etiquette. I'll have an update on some NSS announcements, what's coming up with our Space Forums and Town Halls. And then we'll get right into our program, and then we'll close out for the evening. So as always, remember, please submit your questions using the Q&A function. It's best that way because they are seen directly by our speaker, and it's easy to sort them out. But you can use the chat function. I do ask everybody to be respectful of the panelists and the audience when you're putting things into the chat. We did get a lot of questions that were submitted prior. We will try to cover as many as we can. And always it's best to possibly view this in speaker mode. So that way you just see the speaker who's highlighted as who and is talking to you. So works a little better that way when you're viewing. As always, I do like to remind you to give to our cause. If you're enjoying the programming like these Space Forums and Town Halls, please make a donation to support NSS. You know, we are a volunteer-based organization and we rely on a lot of support from our members and our donors. So I thank you in advance for all of that. I will post this link into our chat over the course of the evening. And again, thank you in advance for any of your donations tonight. As always, complete the Space Forum survey. It only takes a few minutes to complete it. It's completely anonymous, and your feedback helps us in planning future events. And I thank you in advance for doing that. So upcoming, we are only doing one Space Forum this month. We're going to be doing one Space Forum in July. Coming up, we have our former NSS Executive Director and former Deputy NASA Administrator, Lori Garver, who's going to be speaking about her new book, Escaping Gravity, My Quest to Transform NASA and Launch a New Space Age. Actually, our author tonight mentions Lori in her book as well. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But we encourage you to join us on the 21st of July. And it looks like it'll be a really fun, interesting conversation. We don't have all of our speakers lined up for the fall yet. We are working that. We've got some great ideas and we're working those people right now. But we have set a little schedule here so you can take a look. We're only going to be doing one Space Forum in August. Then we do plan on doing a couple of these town halls, which we focus in on our membership aspects. So look for those in September, October, and along with some great technical topics. And you'll be hearing more about that. We'll know more about this on the 21st of July when we have our next Space Forum. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, and I know you're going to enjoy this. Tonight's topic, of course, is Laura Forczyk and her new book, Becoming Off-Worldly, Preparing for Your Future Spaceflight Journey. And Laura has an BS in astrophysics from Florida Institute of Technology and an MS degree in astrophysics from the University of Alabama. She's had a whole career working in the space business. She's done scientific, she's worked as a scientific analyst for facilitating more than 50 experiments on the ISS. She's researched astrophysics and planetary science for NASA. She's done flights on the zero-G campaigns. She's done geological research at Meteor Crater. She's also done the NASTAR, the National Aerospace Training and Research centrifuge tests and actually earned some astronaut wings and ground training. And she recently has formed her own company called Astralytical, where she specializes in space science, industry, and policy, offering advice and consulting to those in the space industry. And all of that has led to her new book, which we'll talk about extensively tonight. So Laura, let me turn it over to you, and let's have a lot of fun tonight.
Thank you so much, Bert. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm just going to go plug Lori's book. And Lori, I'm really excited to hear her talk next month. I'm glad you have invited her because I've been looking forward to reading her book for months. So really glad that you're going to have her back on. I know she's just spoke at ISDC. And I'm glad to be back to NSS. I was just telling Bert that I just rejoined after I don't know how many years of a lapsed membership. I was actually active in grad school, not University of Alabama, but Huntsville. So I was part of How 5 Society, which is a branch of NSS, and they sucked me in, I suppose, got involved in a lot of ISDCs, and then ran the Florida chapter when I switched from Huntsville to UCF. So that was a lot of fun. I had a great time with NSS, and then Michelle convinced me to rejoin recently. So really glad to be home in a sense. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak to you about my new book, which if you haven't gotten it yet, really excited to show this to you. Anybody who orders it directly, yes, Michelle, thank you. Anybody who orders it directly from my website to get an autograph also gets one of these stickers. So really happy to have you support it. Or you could get it off of Amazon. Yes, I'm going to be recording an audiobook. I have young children, including a 4-month-old. So when things get a little bit quieter, then I'll be able to record an audiobook for you all. Really excited to be on here speaking about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, which is opening up human spaceflight, and how do we prepare to open up human spaceflight? How do we prepare to go ourselves? So a bit of backstory. I always wanted to be an astronaut. 3rd grade is the earliest I have proof that I wanted to be an astronaut. I wrote a story about going to the moon and what I would bring to the moon. And I still have this story. It's really simple, right? I 3rd grader, I must have read something about Apollo. I don't really remember, but that's how long I've wanted to go to the, I still want to go to the moon to this day. That's my preference. You know, other people can go do Mars. I want to go to the moon. And so one of the things that I have always stuck in the back of my head as I went through my science career and now doing consulting in the space sector is, how do I prepare? I'm not wealthy, so I can't buy a ticket. I'm actually an inch too short to apply for NASA right now. I have no connections that'll get me to a billionaire that can then fund my seat. But I have faith more so than ever. Last year gave me such hope that I personally will be able to go someday, that all of us will be able to go someday. William Shatner was 90. So if he can go at age 90, you and I, while we're still alive, should be able to go. And so as I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to go to space someday for real, it's not just a pipe dream, how do I prepare? One of the things that I wanted to do was to look at some of the less spoken about topics. So I spoke to a number of flown astronauts, a number of veterans, and not just NASA. I spoke with ESA, actually Samantha Cristoforetti, who's up on space station right now. She was one of the ones I spoke to. JAXA, Korea, 2 Space Adventures private astronauts. I spoke to these people who had gone up there, whether they went through NASA training or some other training, and I asked them what surprised them about their space flights. And I got answers that I didn't expect, because all of us know some of these common threads about human spaceflight, space sickness, or the view of Earth from above, or, the way that we move in microgravity not being intuitive. We know this, but you can't practice. You can't practice while you're on Earth. There's analogs, or there's 25 seconds of weightlessness on a plane that does parabolic flights. I've done 2 of those campaigns, and that's awesome. And it's real free fall. It's real weightlessness, but it doesn't give you that same feeling of living and working in space, even for 4 minutes, or let alone 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years. And so these ways that astronauts cannot practice, you can't just look at a video of Earth from a low Earth orbit, because it's not the same. Your eyes pick up things that video does not. And so getting an idea of what surprised astronauts, what really caught them off guard, what they could not prepare for. And some of these NASA astronauts had been on training for like almost a decade before they actually flew. So these were extremely well-trained astronauts who got surprised anyway, because there's always something that our human inability cannot comprehend until we get up there. I wanted to take it one step further, though. I wanted to understand who are these people buying these tickets. So I also interviewed future flyers, not just people like me who want to go to space someday, but people who would actually purchase a ticket or were in some way sponsored by another organization to go. And I wanted to know, how are they preparing? What are they doing? What are they doing physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? So the holistic view of preparation. And I wanted to get an idea of why. Why were they paying this money, or why were they putting their life on the line with this new technology? You know, why were they doing this? What was their motivation? What did they want to get out of it? So I spoke with a number of pioneers. In fact, 4 people who I interviewed as a future flyer have already gone to space since the book's been published. Actually, before the book was even published in January, which I think is amazing. It's one of those things where, wow, it's happening quickly. For so long, it dragged out. And now all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Wally Funk, I interviewed her before and after her space flight. So excited. She's a wonderful woman. You know, Dylan Taylor and some other people who have recently flown on Blue Origin. Really, really excited to get their perspectives after the fact. That might be a version 2 of my book. I don't know yet, but that's what I wanted to capture. I wanted to capture how these people who are planning to go, who are really truly planning to go, how they prepared, and then how it felt afterwards, what surprised them. And so this book then spurred a community. So if you go to becomingoffworldly.com, you can join the community. We are currently in a workshop on how to prepare for spaceflight mentally and emotionally, because we tend to focus on the physical aspect, you know, the training in a centrifuge, the parabolic flights, the climbing mountains is apparently a big thing on how to train private astronauts right now. Everybody seems to be climbing mountains, underwater training, all of that. But the mental and emotional stuff tends to be not discussed as much and not emphasized, although it's extremely important. So that's what we're going through right now. We're going to dive into different topics. We will dive into the physical preparation. We're going to dive into some of the other things that will help us as a community together to prepare for our future space flights. Anybody can join. You don't need a ticket to space. I don't have one yet. Although if anyone's listening, I'm absolutely willing to go if you want to sponsor me. But anybody who can join this community, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, we've got people all around the world who have joined it. And whether or not you're a space professional or just a space interested enthusiast, you can join our community. And it's one of these things that's really helping me to understand, you know, where other people are coming from, because I have my own perspective and my own preferences. But if we're going to be doing this as a community, then we need to understand each other, which brings me to the topic of my 3rd book. The last chapter of my book spoke about how we as humanity have not yet flown that many people. Only about 600 people, a little more than 600 people have ever flown to space in 6 decades. Now it's starting to open up, but it's still really tiny, right? Only a very select few people, you know, the wealthy, the people who are sponsored by the wealthy, people who are selected by government agencies, whether or not they're official government astronauts. For example, NASA recently selected Alan Stern and Steve Collicott as the first research scientists on suborbital flights. So they're not NASA astronauts, but they will be sponsored by NASA. So these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about now, is flying researchers. And that's a big part of my book also, a whole chapter, because it's not just a playground. It's also for real science. You can get real science done. Even on 4 minutes of a suborbital flight, you can do real science. But who's the ones who's going to be flying first, right? We've had, what, 4? I've lost track. How many Blue Origin crewed flights have we had so far? We've had a number of them. We've had one completely private, separate from ISS, Dragon mission. We've had now one ISS Dragon mission through Axiom, and we've had other plans of doing other things in future. Yeah, 4, Axiom 1, 2, 3, 4 is currently planned out, Axiom 1 completed. And then there's also Dear Moon Project. Polaris Dawn is training to hopefully go by the end of this year on another orbit with the first private spacewalk. It'll be amazing. And so these are the things we're thinking about, but it's still so limited. So I'm actually going to be writing a 3rd book at some point when I'm a little less busy on who are we leaving out, specifically people who don't fit that right stuff bill of, you know, perfect physiological nature, you know, perfectly able body, people who are different, people who have disabilities. The whole idea of, for example, ESA's para-astronaut program or Mission Astro Access, and some of the great work that's being done right now to figure out how we can open it up to the wide percentage of the human population who is currently disqualified from flying. So I'm really excited to be diving into that at some point later this year, not right now. So I don't want to talk very long. I want to open it up to questions really soon. But one thing I want to leave you with is that you don't want to discount yourself, because the moment you discount yourself, then it's never happening, right? So I want you to imagine yourself, if you've always had the dream or whether it's a recent dream of yours, if you can think that you want to go to space, then go ahead and pursue that and don't lose that hope, no matter how old you are. I already mentioned that William Shatner was 90, Wally Funk was what, 80 or 82? I've forgotten the exact number. So as long as you're still living and breathing, you still have an opportunity to pursue that dream. So don't discount yourself, because the world is changing so fast. I know some of the people who have been around in this community for decades have been just waiting their turn. They thought it was going to happen much earlier. Through various circumstances, unfortunately, it hasn't happened as quickly as a lot of us would wish, but it's happening now. And so don't lose hope, because you don't know what the world is going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. The world is changing so fast. Our community is changing so fast. The technology is changing so fast. So I'm really hopeful that all of you, all of us, can get a chance to fly someday. And now I want to open it up for questions.
Thanks, Laura. What I'd like to do before we get to the audience is ask you a few questions about the book itself. So, you chose to write a book not about how to actually become an astronaut, but how to prepare for when you do fly. Is there, what kind of led you to that approach?
There's so much changing right now that if I wrote a book about how to apply to be an astronaut, it'd be outdated within a year. I mean, JAXA just changed their requirements a couple of months ago so that you don't even need a certain educational attainment. So, I mean, things are changing there. Sierra Space just announced yesterday, 2 days ago, about their new astronaut training program, where they've got 3 tiers of astronauts: professional, specialist, and experiential. And so that wouldn't have been in the book. I mean, there's Polaris Dawn wouldn't have been in the book. In fact, I was already writing it. I had already told myself that I was done with the interview stage of the book when Inspiration 4 was announced. And I'm like, I have to jump on this. I can't just ignore Inspiration 4. And so I actually did interview 2 of the people from Inspiration 4, the 2 first people who were announced. And so that's the kind of thing that is changing so rapidly that if I were to try to write a book about how to actually apply, it'd be outdated. So I'd rather write a book that is about how to prepare. We as humanity is not going to change that much in the next century. The technology is going to change. The opportunities are going to change, but we as people are not going to change. So let's go ahead and prepare, and we'll see where it takes us.
Oh, that's great. So let me ask you about something that's in your book, early in your book, because you do some definitions, for example, and you actually tackle that big question about who is an astronaut. And I know it's a great topic on social media. I've been at different sessions with astronauts, and they're asked, actually professional astronauts, and they're asked that question. And most of the time they respond, they really don't care what people call themselves. But have you come across a, kind of where people are zeroing in on that? My take is kind of, to me, astronaut is a profession. And if I had been lucky enough to have been selected for Inspiration 4, I wouldn't have come back and said I was an astronaut. I would have said I was a space traveler, something like that. But where do you see that going?
Yeah, I mentioned that perspective in the book. I mentioned that for some people, it is a title of a profession and not actually something that you do. I mentioned all the definitions that I know of what is space and what is an astronaut and what is a spaceflight participant and all the different ways that you can categorize people. Space tourists, what is that, And my bottom line is that there is no answer, and that language evolves. So this conversation is going to evolve so much over the next few years as the technology evolves, as the opportunities evolve, as the people who are go and get their astronaut wings, right? Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, SpaceX, they're all calling their customers astronauts. So the language is changing. And so for my book, I simply called them astronaut because it's the easiest thing to do. And you can disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm fine if you disagree with me. There's a valid perspective if you disagree with me, because there's lots of different definitions of space, different definitions of what qualifies one to be an astronaut. Is a suborbital flight, a long enough and high enough, and I'm not going to go into it. You can read the beginning of the book, but I think it's more important is not what we call them, but what they do. So why are they going? The motivations for them going, which is one thing I probed with the people who are going to be future flyers the motivations for why they signed up. For some people, it is research. For other people, it's art. For other people, it's just the experience. For other people, a lot of people, it's the outreach. They want to go so they can tell others, so they can inspire others to follow in their footsteps. So that to me is much more important than what language we use to describe them.
Sounds good. Thank you. It's always been an interesting topic. In researching the book, I know you talked to a lot of people as you described. Is there anything that maybe surprised you? I know you talked about what surprised them about maybe their flights, things like that. But is there anything in talking to them and learning about some of their motivations, some of their experiences that surprised you?
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most was just how different and somewhat universal, it's not completely universal, but the overview effect. So author Frank White was kind enough to write the foreword to my book, and I thank him for that. And he coined that term, overview effect. If you haven't read his book, go ahead and read it. He has 3 out now with multiple editions of the overview effect. And it's something that is not completely universal in how it's experienced, but everyone seems to have a different way to come home and feel differently about how they view life, how they view the earth, how they view their place in the earth, whether that is more environmental, whether that is more spiritual, whether that is more, I have to go experience the world and go travel places, or how humans are interacting with the environment and we need to protect the environment. I mean, there's just so many different ways that people, it's unique to each person, and it's not dependent on height or time and space, because we all saw William Shatner's video when he returned back to Earth and the poetry that he was reciting impromptu, where he definitely had a cognitive shift. No one can deny that. And so it's one of those things that I'm so super curious. The more astronauts we get, the more people, I shouldn't say astronaut, right? The more people who fly in space who have that, or maybe don't have that. Maybe some people do not have that shift. I know some people have said that they do not have a difference of how they view things before and after they come back. But the more people who do, it's a great psychological experiment of how are we going to change our mindsets when it comes to countries and borders and our planet and our planetary system and our place within it, depending on how many people go and the diversity of it. So that surprised me, I think, because I thought it would be more uniform, but it was not. It was not uniform at all. And a lot more people than I expected said it surprised them, despite the fact that they all studied all these satellite imagery and they studied other people's interpretations of what they saw. They probably spent a lot of time asking other astronauts how they felt about it, but it still surprised them nonetheless.
Very good. So let me get to some of the questions that were submitted first, and then we'll open it up to some questions that have just come in from our audience. And one of the questions is, how do we protect ourselves from the various radiations we may expose ourselves to by going into space?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ideas right now about how to best protect ourselves of radiation. And of course, it depends on where you're going. So if you just go into low Earth orbit, we have a pretty good handle on LEO. We've been doing this for quite some time. But if you're going beyond, if you're going, to the moon, then we need to figure that out, right? We currently have idea of these short missions with the first Artemis missions. Artemis 3 is just 2 weeks on the surface of the moon. Gateway, I know that they're planning to figure out how to minimize radiation exposure for astronauts who might be on Gateway, but it's not going to be continuously habited like ISS is. It's going to be intermittent. So that's the kind of thing we need to figure out, is how to live and work on another planetary body. And we don't have that figured out yet. And I am not an expert in the area of radiation shielding. I know there's different technologies. There's things like living underground, although I don't know how many people are actually going to want to do that. I think we'll figure it out as we go, but it's an important topic. Another thing to think about is the way that we have radiation limits. At least NASA has it separated for gender. The Russians don't do this, but NASA has the harsher dosage of long-term space is limited to men, and women have shorter spans, and they're thinking about changing that. And they're actually thinking about, okay, what does it actually need to be? And it's one of those risks, I think, that might be for different for a government agency than it is for a private individual.
Very good. Thank you. Another question, which is kind of interesting. What about learning maintenance skills for extended stays? I do remember in reading Scott Kelly's book, Endurance, about how many times he had to repair the space toilet on board the ISS. So might not that be a good thing to know?
I am fascinated by this because space tours are not going to want to clean, they're not going to want to fix the toilet. So I know that the private space station concepts, they do have, they had the concept of the people who are employed by the operators of the space station, so the employees, plus the private individuals who are going to be doing the private astronaut missions. Almost like a hotel aspect, but not quite, because it's still going to be a laboratory setting. At least part of it will be. They're going to figure that out, right? That's for them to figure out how important it is to share the chores, to share the responsibility of cooking, cleaning, all of that, versus the maintenance of, when something breaks, who fixes it? And I'm curious myself as to how they're going to divvy that responsibility out. We had inspiration for it, went up for 3 days. They had a leaky toilet and they didn't bother to try to fix the toilet. I don't know if they knew at the time, come to think of it, whether it was leaking or not, but I don't think they could have fixed it even if they knew. So they're just gonna have to figure that out with a mission longer than 3 days.
Right. This kind of a follow-on question to that. As space travel slowly becomes more accessible, will educational requirements become more flexible?
It already is. Okay, so I shouldn't say that. NASA has tightened them. So NASA is looking for any reason to disqualify people because they have so many applicants. So NASA actually increased the education requirement recently with its solicitation. You now need a master's degree in a certain STEM subject, whereas JAXA has eliminated that requirement altogether. You don't even need a certain degree. You don't need any degree at all. And I think that there's going to be a distinction here between government selected to do a professional job, whether that professional job is science, engineering, maintenance, as you mentioned, versus people who are going up there for specialty reasons. Maybe it is sponsored by a certain company. The first ever private astronaut was actually sponsored by McDonnell Douglas Corporation, Charlie Walker. So, this is not new. It's not a new concept, but I don't know if he necessarily had to go through those educational requirements that NASA set out at the time, or any requirements that NASA set out at the time. I'm not sure. I don't know that version of history very well, but it might be that people who are private individuals or people who are sponsored by other organizations other than government agencies might have different requirements or no requirements at all. So we also saw Oliver Damon, who's 18 years old, just graduated high school, going to be doing a bachelor's degree in physics. He flew with Blue Origin. And so there was no requirement there other than him, I assuming, passing a physical and passing Blue Origin's tests.
Right. Got a question here from a family doctor who wants to know advice for getting involved in the space industry.
So one of the things that we do with Astralytical is space career coaching. We do consulting with companies and government agencies, and we also do space career coaching for private individuals who want to work in space, who want to pursue space. And anybody with any background, any degree can find their place in space. Medical doctors are very much in demand. You need doctors to go be like flight surgeons. You need doctors to do the research, the medical research on actual astronauts, also the research on the the medical equipment, the wearables, the different ways that we monitor human health, the astronaut, what's it called? Drug delivery and protein crystallization and all that kind of bio research, even biomanufacturing is also getting pretty interesting up on space station right now. And I figure that'll continue. I know agriculture is another area, though that's not doctors, but life science in general is very, very strong in demand right now with research on space station. So doctors fit in right there. Pharmaceuticals, there's just so many different roles that doctors could play. On Inspiration 4, they actually had a dedicated doctor, physician's assistant, Haley Arsenault, fly with them. But I think for Polaris Dawn mission, which is the next private Dragon mission, they're not planning to have a doctor. They're just doing medical training. But it's still going to be very important to either have that medical training or to have an actual doctor on call or on board.
I'm going to switch to some of our submitted questions now. And got one from Raymond who's asking about your book. Is it available in hardcover?
Oh, no, it's not, but I could always make it so if there is demand for that. Yeah, so Raymond, get in touch with me. If there is demand, I will go ahead and I think I just need to tweak something with the publisher to see if there's a way to do that. But yeah, I can certainly open that up.
Great. Question from Aiden. What is your favorite planet, moon, or asteroid? And would you travel to this object at any time in the future? I'm sure the answer is yes.
I'm going to open Pandora's box here. I have a line, a little throwaway joke line in my book when I'm talking about definitions. I'm a planetary scientist. I know that most planetary scientists like me define planet broadly. Planet includes Pluto. Planet includes all dwarf planets like Ceres. Planet includes the moon, like planetary bodies. They're all planets to me. And so my favorite is the moon. I love Earth. Okay, so maybe the Earth moon system, maybe that's my answer. But that is absolutely my favorite planet or planetary body out there. I also love astrobiology, and I love the whole search for a life elsewhere, whether that is like Europa, Enceladus, Io, wherever, but also exoplanets. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about what we might discover with exoplanets right now. We've got over 5,000 confirmed exoplanets right now, which is amazing. So that is something that's got me really excited. I don't have a favorite exoplanet yet, but maybe someday I will. Looking forward to seeing what they discover. They're looking at atmospheres now with exoplanets. It's really cool stuff.
Very good. Let's see. James is asking about your outwardly community and where, the size and where are people coming from?
Yeah, so becomingoffworldly.com, you can look at it. I think it's at 43 members right now, or maybe it's at 44. I'm not sure. I've lost track. And yeah, people from all over, mostly right now in the United States and Europe. But we actually, our next guest speaker, who you don't have to join the community to go to the guest speakers. There are Microsoft Teams, you just register for free. And our next guest speaker is from Australia. So really, it's very global. Wherever you come from, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter if you have a space job or want a space job or already have a space job for decades, you can come and join us.
Great. Let's see, I've got a longer question here from John. How do you think we are dealing with the mental health aspects of becoming an astronaut? With the fast distances involved, how do we make appropriate decisions about the members of a crew that are scheduled to fly together? How do we keep them from destroying each other?
It's an excellent question. I actually have a chapter dedicated to crew bonding, crew camaraderie, because it's something that can be greatly beneficial or greatly destructive. It could go either way. And so being able to prepare yourself ahead of time of how to work with a crew, how to bond with a crew, how to work with difficult people, how to work on yourself, because you might be the difficult person, how to just make sure that you have a good boundaries because you're stuck, right? But also that you can help with the crew bonding experience, help to build that trust within your crew so that they can rely on you in life and death situations. And, with the ongoing tension right now on the International Space Station with cosmonauts and astronauts together, I mean, there was definitely a hint of the latest space station crew, the latest, one that just came back. The NASA astronaut did say that it wasn't spoken about. The war in Ukraine was not spoken about, but there was tension because the cosmonauts on board were very pro-Russia. And so you're going to come across that kind of thing, whether it's politics and war, or whether it's religion, or whether it's just your cleanliness habits. People are going to get annoyed at each other. So that's a good answer for a psychologist, or a good question for a psychologist to answer. But there are ways you can prepare ahead of time. That's what the workshop that we're doing right now in the community is trying to piece together about how, and that's next week's topic. So you can join today and go ahead and work through this with us next week of how to be a good crew member and how to make sure you don't kill each other, whatever you said, right?
No, that sounds really interesting. I actually sat next to somebody at the ISDC at lunchtime, and he is a psychology doctorate student and working on automated psychotherapy for space travel. And so I've actually invited him to come and speak at one of our future space forums about this, because it is such an important topic. So we'll keep you informed on that one.
Wow, I'll catch that one.
So, okay, question from Liam here. A large percentage of NASA astronauts are ham radio operators. Do you recommend studying for a ham license?
I myself don't have one, but I've heard it's really cool to do. I've heard that from multiple astronauts, as well as the head of Space Adventures, who has flown private astronaut missions. And they all say ham radio is really fun. It's not a requirement. It's like anything else, right? If you can do it if you enjoy it. And people do tend to enjoy it because you can really speak to anybody around the world who has one of those, the proper equipment and knows how to use it. So for myself, I think I'd tweet because that's where my addiction is. Tweet from space. I would definitely be doing that. But if you want to do ham radio, you go ahead and do that too.
Very good. Oh, here's someone looking for a job from Frederick. Are there opportunities within your company?
Right now I have an intern, so you can contact me directly and we can figure out what your expertise is. I'm not hiring anybody at the moment, but we can see where there might be opportunities for you.
Very good. How soon could we be having an orbiting hotel similar to that in 2001?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine, right? Not this year. Probably not this decade. We do have some really great concepts for some commercial space stations. Axiom segment is going to separate to become Axiom Station. We have Orbital Reef, Starlab, and the Northrop Grumman. I don't know if it has a name yet, but the Northrop Grumman concept for space stations. Those are the 4 that were awarded contracts through NASA. They're not the only 4 concepts out there, but we also have other government agencies that are looking into things like China already has a space station. They have their 2nd crew up there right now. India and Russia both have plans for space stations, and Russia's not going to happen, but India's might. And so with all of these different concepts might come something like centrifuge for artificial gravity. Definitely something that has been an interest for a long time, has been debudgeted for too long. And I'm looking forward to seeing how future space stations might incorporate artificial gravity, or at least figure out if it can work.
Right. Okay, next question comes from our NSS president, Michelle Hadlin. And we are asked this question, and I'm curious about your response. What do you say to people who argue that it is a waste of money to pursue space exploration?
Yes, so this question has definitely plagued me throughout my entire life here. I've been talking about how much I love space, and they're like, why would you do that? So my first job was working on space station research. It was through a nonprofit called CASIS, ISIS National Lab, and my whole job was to figure out how to use space to benefit life on Earth. We were a tiny team when I worked there. I was the first physical scientist hired. There was a tiny biological sciences team, so I worked closely with them. And I really got a handle on how everything we do in space benefits life on Earth, absolutely everything. And then once I figured that out, how to use space station, I then began to connect the dots. Oh, any satellite can benefit life on Earth. In fact, a lot of satellites, most satellites benefit life on Earth, whether it's GPS that runs our entire modern society, or the weather satellites that we rely on every day, Earth observation satellites for agriculture, for mining, for emergency response, for everything runs on satellites, satellite data, communications data, the Starlink. I mean, we had a disconnection before we started recording, and I was thinking in my head, oh, if only we could get those constellations up there that can help me do backup internet, because my internet here is not very good. So these little things that are integrated into our modern society that are taken for granted, that is how life on Earth benefits. The GPS that people don't know that they use other than the maps on their phone, but they use it in other places. The weather that they check on their phone or TV every day. The various ways that we use space with all kinds of satellites, even just to protect us, right? The defense satellites. I mean, I think that it took people as a surprise once the conflict in Ukraine got kicking, and we got to see all this satellite imagery and got to see how much Starlink is benefiting the people down on the ground in Ukraine. So these are the kinds of answers you can give. It's very dependent on who you're speaking to. I've spoken to politicians on the Hill or staffers who ask this question, and you want to give the answer that's most important to them. Education, inspiration, jobs. So those are the ones that you should be emphasizing when you're talking to politicians. But whoever you're speaking about, whatever field they're working in, they're probably using space in some way or another and don't even realize it. Go ahead and tell them. Go ahead and tell them all the ways that they're using space. And then they're like, oh, wow, didn't realize that. And that's where you can clue them in.
I was once asked at an engagement I was speaking at that the person objected to us spending all this money in space. And I said, and I responded, we don't spend any money in space. And they looked at me strangely. I said, we spend all the money on Earth.
Exactly. There are no banks in space, not yet.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to switch to some of the questions that have come in through chat because we got a lot of questions on the chat, and then I'll get back to the Q&A questions. So an interesting one from Carl: should there be some sort of spiritual or philosophical requirement for flying in space, or
I don't
some,
think there should be any kind of requirement at all, because humans are diverse. We have such diversity of people flying. There have been very, religious or spiritual people who have flown, and there have been complete atheists who have flown. I mean, it really just is personal to the human being. Who they are is who they should be when they fly. In fact, this is something that is so important to recognize, that what we do on Earth, who we are, how accepting we are, how tolerant we are of differences, we need to take that out there into space, because we take humanity with us into space. We want to take the best of humanity into space. We don't want to take the kind of people who would disqualify someone for something like religion or politics or fill in the blank, gender or race or whatever it happens to be, the divisions. Obviously you want the health and safety of people in space. But aside from that, I think all of human diversity should be flying.
Very good. An observation from Raymond, I don't know if it's actually a question, but says he's been waiting to go to space since 1961. And he promises if he does get a chance to go, he's not going to look back at the Earth. He wants to look out at the universe. So I know you talked about the overview. What are people looking at when they go to space?
Oh, that's what they're looking at, though. So there's that famous quote, I think it was Edgar Mitchell from Apollo, said, "We went to the moon to learn about Earth," or something. I'm
Bill Anders. We went to explore the moon and discovered the Earth. Right.
Yes, I love that quote, because it's so true. It's so true throughout all of human spaceflight. You might be interested in the universe. That's where I went, and I got my bachelor's degree in astrophysics, because I love the beauty of the universe. But we don't have eyes like Hubble or James Webb. We don't have the ability to see the gorgeous imagery that you could scan in non-visible light or zoom in on black holes. We don't have that with our human eyes. Our human eyes can only see certain amounts of light. And from what I've heard, stars aren't really that impressive in space. What is impressive is Earth. So my guess is you'll probably change your tune once you get up there, and you won't be able to take your eyes off of Earth.
Very good. Question from Dushko about the training you need for spending time on the ISS. I guess I remember when the first space tourist went, they'd spend 6 months in Russia training. I guess I don't know if NASA wants people breaking the ISS. So what, like this recent Axiom trip, what kind of training did they have to take?
Yeah, in general, the private astronaut missions, both with Space Adventures and now with Axiom, they take about 6 months, even up to 2 years to train. And it's a diversity, some of them do go to Star City in Moscow, especially the ones who train with the cosmonauts. Historically, Space Adventures has partnered with Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. They've already said that they're not going to partner with Roscosmos anymore. But the people who have partnered with Roscosmos, they did go and train for 6 months with the Russians. People like, the Axiom crew, the future ones, as well as the one that just flew, they are actually training in Houston, and Axiom has its own facilities to train as well. There's a number of private places now that you can train. There's NASTAR Center outside of Philadelphia. There's, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Orbit. It's spelled orbit with an E at the end. I apologize. There's a number of private facilities now where you can train to be an astronaut. They're partnering with NASA in some way or another, or partnering with commercial providers. Blue Origin has, you asked about Space Station, but Blue Origin has its own training program. And Virgin Galactic, I think, is also developing its own training program. So it really depends on the spaceflight provider. 6 months does sound about right. From the people I've spoken with, they're wanting to get that down a little bit. So it depends on what the goal is. Looks like the Polaris Dawn mission, which is going to be the next Private Dragon mission, is going to be training a little longer than 6 months, because they've already started and they don't have a date yet. They want to do it by the end of this year. So probably a little bit longer than 6 months now. So I think it just depends. I personally don't know that many people, and this is one thing that I covered in the book a little bit. I interviewed someone who's a future Axiom tourist. He's really excited, but with the pandemic, he actually had to focus on his company. His company went through a lot of stresses, and so he actually had to give up his slot. He said he could not go in the first flight or even the second flight because he just had to stay on Earth and not train for 6 months elsewhere. He had to focus on his life. And I think we're going to see a lot of pushback from people who just can't afford, whether it's, can't afford to take time away from your job or your family or your responsibilities to train for 6 months. As much as fun as that does sound, because a lot of the fun is from the astronaut training, right? Everyone wants to go take those really fun flights, whether it's a parabolic flight or a high performance jet. Everyone wants to do the training in a centrifuge. But how much of that can you do with the private astronauts when they're getting busier and busier and busier? Who knows? We'll find out. We'll find out if there's a balance there to be had of how much training people can set aside versus the safety of the space station or future space stations.
Very good. Question or comment from Eric, and it kind of aligns to the question we talked about before about maintenance and being able to do things. And he talks about a naval ship, and I can use the experience of submariners where everybody has, everyone has to know everything. And it's something that also Chris Hadfield said, living aboard the space station was so much different than flying on a shuttle mission where you're only going up for 2 days. You have to be able to do a lot of things. So do you see for some of the long duration flights that the need that you're going to not just be trained to do the flight itself, but maybe how to take care of the spacecraft or the space station you're on?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The more time you spend up there, the more risk that something's going to go wrong, either medically or mechanically, or you might need to just band together to figure out how to work together properly, or maybe somebody is out for the count and you need to take over their job. So yes, I think diversity of abilities and knowledge, I think, is going to be very vital for longer term missions, not for a week or two, but for people who are going to be up there for quite some time. They need to have that diversity of what they can do because they're going to be asked to do a lot of different things.
Another question from Dushko about any international providers except Space Adventures for going up to orbit.
Yeah, so Axiom actually has flown an international mission with this last mission. They haven't announced the full crew with their next mission yet, but the last one had an Israeli on board and a Canadian, and Michael Lopez Alegria, who is American, but also from Spain. So yeah, very international there. When it comes to Polaris, they've only announced the first crew. I don't think it's international at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if they, went ahead and made it so. There's no reason why it can't be international. In fact, one of the things I point out in the last chapter of my book is that only about a quarter of the nations of the world have ever flown even one representative of their country to space. That means 3/4 of the planet are still waiting to have somebody from their own nation to fly in space. So there's a lot of people now who maybe have the means, but not yet the opportunity to fly. And they're waiting in line. They bought a Virgin Galactic ticket, or maybe they contacted Blue Origin, or they contacted SpaceX, whatever it happens to be, that are going to be the first from their country to fly. And I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Very good. Another question about what are the basic relative costs for these different flights to space at this point?
Yeah, they're going to have to come down for sure. I discussed that in the book as well. But right now, the price for a Virgin Galactic flight, I think it's up to $450,000. I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I double checked. It's not $250 anymore. They've raised it, and they're not yet operational. So just wait. They're burning through their cash right now. So we're just going to have to see how that plays out, whether they raise them again. Blue Origin is not disclosing their prices. So they started out with an auction. That auction winner paid $28 million, but that is not the price of each ticket. They used the bidding information to get a good handle on what people are willing to pay, and they have not disclosed that, and they've not allowed their flyers to disclose how much they paid. Axiom mission has also not disclosed, but it's widely rumored that it's $55 million per seat.
Wow.
The last Roscosmos Space Adventures partnership was last year with 2 individuals from Japan, and rumored that it's about $40 million per seat, about $80 million total. And we don't know about the Dear Moon mission. So for those who don't remember, that was announced back in, was it 2019, lost track of time, but that was a private mission to circumnavigate the moon with a starship. And so that's going to be 8 private individuals plus some SpaceX crew. And we don't know the price of that, but we know it's going to a significant amount of money. This is all we really know. Looking forward to seeing what those prices get leaked eventually and what it might be to just go around the moon, let alone land on the moon. Oh, and if you don't want to float in space, you do have the option of going to the stratosphere, which is a little bit more affordable for some people, because I think that's about $200,000. Or is it 100,000? I forget. I'm sorry. There's a number of companies that are doing high altitude balloons, Space Perspective, Worldview, and a few other ones around the world.
That's an interesting option. Yes. I was on a call recently with someone from Blue Origin, and they, of course, did not also mention the cost. They pointed to that recent auction in New York City where someone paid $8 million and is going to give the seats to some teachers. So they said that could be that could give you an idea of what it costs. But then I did ask if they were going to have any getaway specials. so
right now there is no incentive for the price to come down.
Right.
So don't expect the price to come down anytime soon. It's just going to be sky high for some time until the financial means, still makes sense business wise for it to come down for you and me.
Right. Oh, I do see a couple questions here about will there be room for space lawyers on the spacecraft?
We have so much need for space lawyers, and I definitely applaud the hard work that they do with the legalese. So we just had the 20th signatory of the Artemis Accords. For those who don't know, that is an international agreement led by the United States. So we need space lawyers to bring us together, let alone to get the permissions to, fly to space. I used to work for a company that went bankrupt that wanted to do suborbital point-to-point transportation. Lots of lawyers needed there to figure out not just, landing in the United States after we take off from the United States, but landing in another country and how that's going to work. So we need lawyers too. We need them. So if you want to fly in space, you have to convince somebody, right? So convince somebody you want to be the first lawyer in space.
Sounds good.
Come to think of it, wait a second. We had politicians in space. Was one of our two Jake Garn or?
I don't think Jake Garn was an attorney.
I'm not sure.
But I think Bill Nelson was an attorney, right?
Might have already been taken then, that first lawyer in space.
Yeah. So let's see. Oh, a question about the benefits of space. If you want to know a benefit of space, ask a dinosaur. So just an observation.
Absolutely. We need to become multi-planetary, right? I'm with you.
So let me go back to some of the questions. We got a few more questions in. You've answered so many already. I think we'll take some more because we have a little bit more time left. But I know it's a question you talk about in the book. How long does it take for a human body to adapt to the space environment?
Yeah, so space adaptation sickness, it is not something that you can predict ahead of time. I've even been told that it's not correlated with your vomit comet experience. So I did get sick on my parabolic flights. The first time I was able to hold out because it was only 25 parabolas. The second time it was 40 parabolas and I got sick halfway through, but it's not a correlation because it's different. It has to do with the way that your mind expects your eyesight to match. So we have fluid in our brains and we have fluid in our ears. And I'm not a medical doctor, so forgive me, I'm just repeating what I've read. But if it doesn't match what your eyes see, because remember, there's no up and down in space. There's no ground and ceiling. Everything is the same, but your mind, your eyes expect to see up and a down. But your inner ear and all of your fluid in your brain, it does not feel that way. And so that's where you get sick in space. It's not the transition of up, down, the transition of high G, low G in a vomit comet. That's not the same thing. It has to do with the way that your mind expects. And so for some people, they don't get sick at all. For more than half the astronauts, they do. And it usually lasts about a day or two, upwards of 5 days. So it could be quite some time. I just mentioned Jake Garn. There's something called the Garn Scale. Some of you probably remember this more than me. I wasn't aware of this at the time, obviously, but I was too young. But that is something that can measure just how sick you were, because he was very, very, very sick on his space flight. And he went up with shuttle. And so it's one of those things where you cannot predict it, but you can protect against it by medication. The Russians also do spinning around in one of those chairs. NASA doesn't do that. They just use medication. Nobody on the Inspiration 4 mission got sick, but they used medication because about half of them felt sick. And that is something very important to take into account. If you have a short mission, like 3 days or even a week, you're going to feel sick in the beginning. Not guaranteed, but you're probably going to feel sick, or one of your crew members is going to feel sick. So you might need to pick up the slack there and help them. So just plan for that. Plan to go a little bit slow in the beginning because you just want to adapt. You want to take it all in. You also move differently in space. For me, I was a bouncing ball during my parabolic flights. I did not know how to move in microgravity. It's not like swimming. It's not like skydiving. I was really uncontrolled. And so you're going to have to learn how to move. So just give yourself that grace and that patience that first couple of days to adapt.
Oh, great. Yes. It's kind of a follow-on question to that about, is there any way to prepare your brain for it? I know you talk a little bit about, mental preparation as well.
So I have an interview in there from Story Musgrave. If you've never heard him speak, he's a blast. He did a number of things like watch the TV sideways, or even upside down. He tilted his head backwards by raising the bed, the bottom of the bed, the foot of the bed upwards. Apparently the Russians do that too. So he did a number of things. And one thing he talks about is he expected things to be weird in space. So they were weird just because he expected it. I don't know if that mind over matter actually works, but it seemed to work for him. So there's a number of things you can do. You can try. I don't think there's a solid, real way to prevent it except for medication, but there's certainly ways you can try.
Very good. Let me go back to another question that I see in the chat. This one, this came from Dushko again. He's been working on making a prototype for a space elevator challenge. Do you see space elevators in our future someday?
I hope so. I hope on the moon. I don't know about Earth, but it seems like a really cool concept. I definitely support any kind of research that goes into all these great ideas that may or may not come to fruition.
Oh, very good. Let's see if we have, at this point, in terms of the research about what we're exposing ourselves to in space, do we know all of the implications of long duration spaceflight?
I think you can answer that one. No, of course we don't. I mean, we have been studying it for, a little more than a year is the longest people have flown in space, but it's not something we have a real good grasp on, right? How long-term is long-term? Is a year long-term? Yes, right now a year is long-term, but when it comes to a human lifetime, it's not long-term. So if we're going to be intergenerational, that is definitely something that is to be studied. That is one thing that we are certainly lacking is we don't understand how to truly live for a long period of your lifetime in space or off planet, off Earth. And so that's something that we need to work towards. Really looking forward to figuring out how we're going to live on space stations if we do like O'Neillian cylinders, or if we do, the lunar base and then go on to Mars, and, lots of different ways that we could figure out how to move off Earth that we just have no idea how to deal with yet. It's not just the physical, it's also the mental. It's also like separation from our home, our families, our friends, the wind on your face, the rain, the ocean, all of these little things that we take for granted here. You talked about radiation earlier in the talk, right? All these things we still need to learn so much about. We're at the very beginning. We are at such a first step. It's a very exciting step, but it is the very beginning.
Right. What I want to do now is just see, we've got a lot of people on. If anybody wants to ask a question directly to Laura, we certainly can do that if you want to raise your hand. We do have Aiden has raised his hand. So we do have a number of NSS people on as well. So we can certainly invite them to do that. So let me just go to, so Aiden, I'm going to allow you to speak and ask your question. So here we go. So you're on mute right now, so you're going to have to unmute.
Hello.
Aiden.
Hello. Do you think time dilation will be a major issue with deep space travel?
Certainly not anytime
will it
soon.
deter any potential space travelers?
Yeah, not anytime soon. We are so far from that. Where we are right now is chemical propulsion, which does not go very fast at all. We have looked into things that might take us faster. I mean, solar sails is really promising. Some other means of going faster than we currently go. We're going to need to go a lot faster or go a lot further out to like a much closer to a high mass body, a very, very, very high mass body before time dilation does anything for us. I am a physicist, but my work has been more in the near term practical applications, but it's really fun to read up on some of these long-term things. And I hope that you and I can talk about some of those exciting, more science fiction-y kind of topics in the future.
Great. Thank you, Aiden, for your question. Let's see. I'm going to just see if we have a few any other questions. I know we've got a couple of our NSS officers on. We've got our CEO, Anita Gale. Anita, would you like to say
Anita.
something?
I have to say, Anita, I remember from when I was helping to run ISDC, and you were always so very kind and very, very competent. So it's nice to connect with you again.
Well, thank you. Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted, Anita. Yeah.
All right, very good. Let's see, where's, oh, well, I don't have the camera on. Don't have any questions, but really enjoyed your presentation. I love the fact that we do these space forums. We're going to keep on doing them, even though we're getting out of COVID. By the way, thank you for mentioning ISDC. We had a very good International Space Development Conference over Memorial Day weekend, and we're happy to go live on conferences.
Looking forward to going to one in the future.
Yeah, hope to see you again. and welcome back to NSS. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Let's see. I see Carl has raised his hand. So Carl, want you to speak? Okay, you are on mute, so you have to unmute.
How about now?
Okay, we hear you, Carl, so you can ask your question.
Hello, Carl.
Okay. Hi, I wondered if you had come across any information regarding the tests that were done on John Glenn the second time he went up to check the effect on a person up in age compared to a younger person.
I haven't, but I really need to. That's a very good question. Have you? Is there anything you can point me to?
I haven't come across anything, and I'm wondering what the results were from that test. That would be interesting.
Me too. Yeah, the more that we fly individuals who are older, the more that we will understand how the human body interacts to space, even if it's not the most, able-bodied, right stuff kind of body. And age is one of those areas where we're only beginning to understand how to, it used to be a disqualifier and it's no longer a disqualifier. John Glenn, then Wally Funk, then William Shatner. Who's going to be next? I don't know.
And also, I think the condition of the mind is important too, and maybe getting into the notion of looking into meditation on long trips in space would be the same thing that was done on board the solar aircraft recently.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there have been studies on meditation in space. I actually just read one on yoga in space, which, come to think of it, it's really challenging to do yoga in space, but these are the kind of things that might help the human body and the human mind to relax and enjoy the moment and not stress. Stress management is very important in space.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thanks, Carl. Carl's always asking good questions. I see a couple things in the Q&A. Nice comment there from Donna is that it's an exciting topic. She just purchased your book.
Thank you, Donna. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, and she said if it has any questions about your community membership, how should she contact you?
Oh, so you can contact me in multiple ways. I've got email on there. I've got, social media, personal social media, not for the community, but you can just reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or email, and I'm happy to chat with you. Even have a phone call if you want.
Great. We'll post the Off-Worldly website again as well. And let me just see if I'm just going down through the questions. We had quite a few. Let's see if I see any others. If anyone else wants to raise their hand, they can do that. As I'm just scrolling through, I think we've covered most of those questions already.
Really good questions.
Yeah, it's really been fabulous, and I think allowing us to ask as many, having people ask as many questions as we have makes it really interesting, as you said, versus just a presentation. I do see Larry has his hand up, so while I'm going through and scrolling, Larry, why don't you ask your question?
A couple of things. Looking at your book, it doesn't have all the answers, but it directs people to where they can go to find more answers. And like I said, this is like an all-around book. A lot of people like specialize in solar power or lunar settlements or something. I mean, you try to answer. This is a lot of things. And I was just thinking, with your enthusiasm like this we would NSS would be proud if we had a special interest group, a general special interest, where people that can all come get together and ask questions like that, and somebody can take the question and find the answers for them like this, and maybe get another book out of it. Who knows?
Thank you for that, Larry. Yeah, I don't pretend to know all the answers. In fact, that's one thing that I really emphasize is that we are learning together. And my job within the book and within the community is to talk to the people who might know those answers, the specialists who are, someone asked about radiation, someone asked about, sickness, someone, all these things that I'm not a specialist in, but I can ask the right people and they can try to explain it. And we don't know all the answers, but we're trying to learn together. So yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad that you enjoy the book. And my next book is already, I have an idea for my next book already, but maybe a fourth book or next edition of this book. Really excited to see how the technology changes as well as the opportunities.
Yeah, one question is when you, my train just fell off the track. Sorry, hold on. Go ahead, Bert.
Okay, the last question I see in the Q&A has to do with any insights on any NASA work on artificial gravity.
I know that there have been interest, but it has not been well funded. I know that there's been tests on rodents in tiny centrifuges, I think through JAXA, but don't quote me on that. And I know that other people privately have tried to get funding for artificial gravity research. I don't know the status of it. Certainly not an expert, just a fan.
Right. Let me see, Laura, if there are any other questions that I'm missing or anything else in the submitted questions. Let's see here. Oh, I guess maybe it's a question you talk about the medicine. Do you see any limitations or medical limitations that might prevent people from doing some of these short suborbital flights?
That is something that's currently being tested right now. I'm glad that you brought that up because not only is that a topic that I addressed in the last chapter book, but it's something I'm really passionate about is, people who are different, people who have a medical condition, chronic or temporary, people who have a disability, people who have different bodies, how are they going to be accommodated? And we're just beginning to see this. So when Inspiration 4 was announced and Haley Arsenault was announced to be the first person with a prosthesis to fly, we later learned that she's not. NASA has actually been flying astronauts with prostheses, but they haven't publicly announced it. And through privacy, we don't know the names of who and when, as well as a whole long list of other types of medical procedures, things that would surprise you, things that would definitely disqualify you if you had them before you applied. But because these were trained astronauts, NASA went ahead and flew them again. And, I'm not in the medical community, so I don't know if any research has been published on how these people who flew with these medical conditions or these procedures, surgeries, that kind of thing, how they reacted to spaceflight, but no one has died then due to, any of that. So therefore, I think it could open up quite a bit. We have definitely seen a lot more interest. I want to again mention the Mission Astro Access. If you are disabled, their application to apply for the next zero-G flight is tomorrow. So go ahead and look that up and you can apply. Just amazing work that's being done. And you just never know how we're going to be able to open it up by doing this kind of early research so that we don't disqualify anyone needlessly. We have a whole host of humanity to open it up to. We don't want to just limit it to just the most able-bodied, healthy person. That's what we've been doing for 60 years. We want to open it up a lot more to the rest of humanity.
Very good. Let me ask you one final question then before we close out. This is kind of being a predictor. It's taken approximately 60 years to get to 600 people to have flown into space. When do you think we'll hit the 1,000 threshold? How soon do you think that will come?
Oh gosh, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. I hope it's soon. Cadence is advancing, but it's only 6 people at a time in a Blue Origin flight. 4 people at a time in a SpaceX mission or an Axiom mission. It's small numbers right now. So small numbers will add up over time, and cadence will increase over time. But I don't know when we're going to get to 1,000. Hopefully, not another 60 years.
Very good, Laura. Thank you so much. It was so enjoyable to hear your thoughts, and your book was fabulous. It's a fun read, so I encourage everybody to take a look at it, especially if you're planning to fly in space at some point. So really want to thank you for your enthusiasm, your knowledge, and your expertise. We're really glad you were able to join us. And as Anita said, thank you for joining NSS again. We appreciate having you back.
Well, thank you, Bert, and to NSS for inviting me to speak. And thank you to the audience for your questions and for your attention.
Bert?
Yes, Larry, is that you?
Yeah, that's me. Like I said, I'm having a bad night. You mentioned,
Okay, go ahead, ask Larry.
The question I was trying to answer before, you said you had 44 people in this. What is this group that you're talking about?
Well, it's an online community. You can go to becomingoffworldly.com and you can read about it. You can see the screenshots of what the community is. It's like part social media, part support group, part just a community of friends that can get together and work and learn together about how to prepare to become an astronaut. So we're currently doing a 4-week series on how to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally. We're going to do these every few months, on a different topic. Previously, it was how to prepare yourself in general for spaceflight. Now we're focusing on mental and emotional. Next time is going to be physical. And from there on, we'll do other topics. So really excited to be, I just started this community about 3 months ago, I think, maybe less. So it's really been a fun experiment to see people come together. It's a safe place for people to express themselves positively if they want to go in space.
I just posted it in the chat, Larry, the website. So hopefully you can take a look at it.
Okay, because this is something I mentioned earlier about a special interest group chapter, but the thing is we can work with Becoming Off-Worldly, and maybe we'll come up with an MOU, or maybe come a special chapter.
Absolutely.
Anybody's welcome to join. I'm happy to discuss some kind of NSS partnership. That sounds like fun.
Sounds great. Well, very good. Well, thanks again, Laura. And I do want to thank Fred Becker, as always, for all his assistance in organizing the space forums, and my colleague, Larry Ahern, Vice President of Chapters, who we've been teaming on these for the last 2 years, and it's been so rewarding. And like tonight, hearing such an interesting topic and a great speaker. So again, Laura, thank you so much. So everybody, what I want to do is share my screen again real fast as we close out the evening. And as always, I just want to thank you for attending tonight. It's been a pleasure having you. Again, another fun topic. I hope you can join us on the 21st of July when we have Lori Garver on to hear about her book and her experiences at transforming NASA. So as always, thank you for attending. Have a great evening. For those of you in the different time zone, I hope a great day ahead and a great weekend. And stay safe, everybody. Take care and good night.